Okay, so we are joined in conversation by Amin Ibrahim, Senior Director of Value and Solutions at Hootsuite. I know that Amin is incredibly well considered in the pre-sales world. So, Amin, thanks so much for taking the time to speak.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Um, so, the first question we're asking everybody in these conversations is, what do you love about pre-sales?
What do I love about pre-sales? I
Yeah.
love that pre-sales is the most exciting parts of the sales process, and it's a very future-focused role. Like when we're talking to people, it's all about what can be,
Yeah.
and just the possibilities there are endless. And there's a one of my earliest bosses and mentors in the world of pre-sales. He used this term that has stuck with me ever since. So, what is it now? I guess 11 years later, the term painting the dream,
Uh-huh.
which I just love. We get to paint the dream for customers, get them thinking about that beautiful future, and then it's on them to go and execute on it.
Yeah. Amazing. And you can really kind of bounce off each other through that process as well. It's really
Yeah,
exciting there.
yeah.
Super.
It's just a very positive, almost like a glass half full profession,
100%.
which I love.
Excellent. Super. And in terms of hiring, so you've spent a good period of time in a leadership position now.
Yeah.
How much hiring have you done? And how important has hiring been for you?
Yeah, so I've done a ton of hiring. So my first team is in a leadership position. I had one existing person, and then everybody else I had to hire. And then going forward, I had to keep hiring and had to keep coming up with training programs and like an academy so that we could teach people the game of pre-sales. And due to the nature of our technology stack, because it isn't super technical, we could hire people from very interesting backgrounds as
Hmm.
long as they were curious and as long as they had that optimistic, confident attitude, they tended to do quite well. So over, I guess, since 2016, probably hired dozens of people on the team.
Congratulations, I mean, and
Thank you.
I know you have a very big team, and if you are looking at all the components of the pre-sale cycle, discovery sessions, demos,
Yeah.
or in partnering with C-level executives, could you think about the components that are crucial for this position? What is the most important part?
So it's a great question because I would say that they are all very important. And one thing that was really important for us to do early on was to create a very clear career path with different levels of SCs. So for example, when SCs first join the team, pre-sales people first join the team, there is much more of a focus on the demo, right? Like their job at that point is to work on more transactional, quicker deals. The demo has to be amazing. Sometimes they don't even get a chance to be on a discovery. So they just have to be really, really good at doing the demo. And as they move up, they have to become really good at doing the discovery as things get more and more complex. And then for our most senior people, they have to be really good at C-level presence because they are pitching to those types of people and they need to make sure that they've got not just the knowledge and the confidence, but also it's hard to measure the gravitas
Mm.
to push those deals through. So it's really important to make sure you're segmenting your pre-sales people so they can focus on those things as they need to in their career. They're all very important, but where they are on that career ladder changes the relative importance of them. But the more junior they are, the more important demos are. The more senior they are, the more important executive presence is, and then discovery fills the gap in the middle.
I love it. I've never heard about different components being important for different levels. So this is news for me. Uh,
Yeah, they're all important. Just the relative important changes and the amount of time you spend doing it. So somebody who's very new, they'll do maybe 5% of executive presence and 70% demo. And then as it gets bigger, as they go up higher on their career, somebody who's very senior might be 50% executive presence, 10% demo, 40% disco, who knows? But the ratios change as people go up and down.
and I believe it is very important for them also that they know the career path and
Yeah.
they know the skills that they are going to acquire on a
Exactly.
longer period of
That's why
time.
that's why they stick around and don't join others.
To learn also how to
Yeah.
partner with level executives.
Yeah.
Amazing. And if you're thinking about the difference, I assume you have a lot of people in your team, and some of them are your favorites, some of them are not necessarily your favorites. So could you think about the favorites one? Which are the top three qualities that they possess, and what makes them special SEs in comparison to an average one?
Oh, that's fantastic. So my favorite ones are the ones who are very confident, who are it's almost like they like to break the rules and figure out how to make things happen even when people tell them no or that this can't happen. So ones that are very entrepreneurial, I'd say that's a good word. And the ones that are really curious, the ones who go deep on exactly how a customer works, exactly how they make money, all that other stuff, that helps them so much with everything else that they do.
Yeah. So that kind of tenacity is actually quite is new to these conversations. I think that
Yeah.
it's something that's important. It's not been brought in. And then in terms of the curiosity, that just comes up time and time again. And it seems that mixture of kind of curiosity and thirst for learning alongside customer centricity together is just what really enables the customer to have trust and to want to build
Agreed.
the future together.
Because if we think about that, right? So curiosity and that customer centricity, that's actually what leads into the mysterious business acumen that is so important for people, right? Like business acumen is such an important thing for the people that we want to hire. We want to know that they get business, they get companies, they get process, but the things that lead you to that are the curiosity and the customer centricity. There's a really, really good SC always wants to know why something is the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's a lot of them who are just like, you said you wanted this, here's how we do it. You said you wanted this, here's how we do it. So in the same way that we have AEs who are order takers, customer said this, here's this. We also have AEs who are more curious, who are like, customer said this, but knowing their business and knowing my experience and knowing what we have to offer, I think it should be that. And then that becomes really interesting. Then you get the people that are more prescriptive and actually consulting with customers rather than just taking orders. That's where we get the most value.
Yeah. So it's kind of like an intellectual curiosity. No,
Yeah.
that's where a big part of the enjoyment comes from.
Agreed.
And how do you, when you're interviewing or going through the interview process, how do you try and assess these characteristics?
The biggest thing I look out for when I'm interviewing someone are the questions that they ask me.
Okay.
What are the questions that they ask me? Are they asking me questions to move me beyond the sale and already imagine them in the role? Are they asking me a lot of questions about the business itself and how it functions?
Yeah.
Are they asking me about things like average deal size, deal cycle, day in the life? What does this look like? Are they trying to build a picture of exactly what it is? And that gives me a great idea of how they'd be in a discovery, because in essence, an interview is a discovery session for both parties. And so you get a really good idea based on the types of questions they ask.
Yeah. In many ways, the whole interview process from a candidate's perspective is like a mini sales cycle, from
100%.
getting your CV and your LinkedIn profile together. It's, it's kind of, it's marketing to extent. And then the interview process is a two-way qualification discovery with selling yourself and so on. And obviously so it's really interesting. Okay, so there are some, jumping back a bit to the beginning. So there are some jobs where perhaps like a top performer might be 15% more effective than a kind of a solid performer, let's say. Another job, I think they say, like with software development, like a great developer's 10x that of a solid developer. What do you think that looks like in pre-sales? So what do you think is actually the impact difference between a really great SE versus a solid performer?
It's a great question, and sometimes it's actually a bit hard to tell, because what tends to happen is the really good SCs tend to then amass the biggest accounts and the best partnerships with AEs, and then they saddle them. So I think it's actually very closely linked to sales, because it's very typical. Like we have these superstar sellers who will sell 4, 5, 6, 10 times as much as your average performer. And then you have your superstar SCs who work really closely with these superstar sellers, and their fortunes like rise together at the same time.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's definitely a lot more than 15%, because a great pre-sales person will then work with those great salespeople, and in most cases, it's multiples, at least multiples.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And in terms of intuition, could you think about the role that it plays in your hiring process? A lot of hiring managers told us that gut feeling is super important. Like,
Yep.
you want that person in your team, and we are curious about your view on this.
It's interesting because I don't know if it's a good thing in this day and age, because we're hyper focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we want to make sure that everything we do is very scientific, and we've got great reasons for everything. But at the end of the day, gut feeling is really, really important. When I am talking to somebody and they're interviewing for this role, I always ask myself the question, would I buy something this person is selling me? And if the answer is no, then that is a massive red flag, and odds are we're not going to move forward with that individual. I think it's such an important thing. Like, this is a role that is very heavily linked to sales, and at the end of the day, they need to be able to sell things. They need to come across as being genuine and trustworthy and confident and curious and all that other great stuff. And sometimes you'll have an interview with someone and be like, that person can sell virtually anything. Like, that they will be very successful. And others, you can tell that they're going to have a struggle. And you can tell that based on gut feel. I would say it's important not to only go on gut feel, but gut feel is an important component of this choice. It's human nature. It's hard to get beyond.
Yeah. I think the from this whole study, from talking to people, from looking at the responses, the big topic is exactly that. It's around intuition. Like, when does intuition help? Because obviously it does, 100%, and there's a reason why I have an interview.
Yeah.
And when is it a hindrance? And working that out. And to be honest, we're not there either in terms of understanding our position on it, but it's a really interesting question, and it seems an important one as well, because the responses are overwhelmingly strong on reliance on intuition. So
yeah,
great. Okay.
I think it was George Soros who said that, like, he makes all his decisions based on intuition.
Yeah.
And you'd think that somebody like that, who's made billions in the markets, would do everything based on pure data or cold hard logic and all the other stuff, but he comes out and says, no, it's all intuition.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the analogy with the markets and investing and so on. We were talking about this before. So the question is, how do you combine the data that you can get with the intuition and bring it together? And we were talking about the example of, for example, investors often, before they make an investment, they'll write down why they're making that investment based on the data, but also based on the intuition. And then 6 months later, we'll revisit that based upon what's happened, because obviously your view of why you made a decision may change along with events. And there's and that runs as well with hires, So one of the questions we're asking, and we might as well go there now, is in terms of quality of hire. Do you have any process whereby you 6 months later or a year later look back on what you expected that person to look like in terms of their abilities, where they'd be strong, where they wouldn't be so strong, and see how that's mapped against reality?
So we don't have a specific process for it. It's more of an informal process, and it does happen, where it's like, oh, I thought this person would be further along than we thought, or in some situations like, oh yeah, that was a bad hire. And it does happen, but there's no formal process for it. But it's a great idea. I think we should have a formal process. I think in a lot of cases, it just ends up getting consumed into whatever performance management process companies have.
Yeah.
And then that becomes part of it. But I think it is important enough to warrant being its own thing.
Yeah, completely agree. And in terms of you talk about, so every manager, if they're honest, has had a mishire at some point down the line. I certainly have. If you were to go back and kind of advise yourself, your earlier self, around interviewing, what advice would you give yourself, or what advice would you give to kind of rookie hiring managers based on your experience?
That's back to the earlier question. Go with your gut. Anytime there's ever been a situation where my gut was like, I don't know about this person, but then either through discussions with others or looking at rubrics or whichever, I've gone against that. I've regretted it.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Amin. And in terms of the split between the skills, if you could think of a pie chart, and there would be hard skills, soft skills, and cultural fit, which would be the split between them? Like, what is the most important when you assess a candidate?
Yeah, and sorry, is cultural fit one of the three?
Yes.
Yeah. I would say soft skills is the most important. Again, this depends on the nature of your business. There are some companies that have very, very technical requirements where hard skills are very important. It's almost like it's like a binary yes/no decision. If you don't have this skill, you will not be successful here. But in companies where we don't have that, I think soft skills are really, really important. Because if you have the right soft skills, you can acquire the hard skills. And the culture thing is an interesting one, right? Because it's like you do want people who do fit into a culture, but you also want that culture to be diverse. And so sometimes having people who don't fit in the culture who join the team can actually add a lot to the team by bringing a completely different perspective. So I would say the most important thing is the soft skills. And the nature of those soft skills will also impact the hard skills. Like if somebody's really good at simplifying very complex concepts, then they can learn some of those hard skills and then become really powerful. If somebody doesn't have the soft skill of frankly understanding technology, then they're going to have a hard time being successful no matter what. They might even have the hard skills, but not be able to explain it to anybody or not be able to move past it. So I'd say the soft skills are paramount in that pie chart, unless your technology stack is really complex and the hard skills have to be there.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And you mentioned several times the fact that you value diversity in your team, and I assume also personality diversity is one of the values. Have you ever been in the position, I don't know, to have two people super different in your team that do not get along, and the personality?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Okay.
Personality clashes happen for sure, but it's interesting. I remember talking to so we use Consensus at Hootsuite, and it's great people there. You know, made friends with them, fantastic people based out of Utah, like the nicest people. And in general, people from Utah tend to be very nice and very harmony oriented. And so they actually have a cultural rule in the company called no peacemongering, because they actually want to have people have hard conversations and challenge each other. And so sometimes having people that are knocking heads can be a good thing, because there's a healthy amount of conflict that you want to be able to actually move things through. Sometimes you don't want to take no for an answer. And it's a fine balance. You don't want people at each other's throats, but you also don't want the situation where everything is groupthink and everybody is perfectly harmonious, because that could be dangerous too.
Yeah. They say with that nothing shines without friction, or something like that is the expression, and there's definitely
exactly
the balance now.
Love that.
Cool. Okay, so in terms of you've talked about soft skills. I think you mentioned before. I'm just looking back up now through. So we talked about kind of optimism and business acumen, and so do you have a defined set of soft skills or characteristics or traits that you're looking for, and how do you go about over the interview process trying to kind of assess those different traits?
So the curiosity one's a really important one. Ability to present is a really important one. Ability to think fast on their feet and not be deer in the headlights is a really important one. I'd say confidence is an important one too. What else soft skill wise?
And
I'd say those are the big ones.
And how about the self-confidence? I was curious how you assess it. Like, is the gut feeling or the way they present, or do you have some questions?
it's a mixture of gut feeling and the way they present and the way they because so as part of the interview process, we always have people do a mock demo because the mock demo is there's been so many times where sometimes people seem amazing on paper and then they just crash and burn when they have to present to you.
Yeah.
And you'll see sometimes and they'll have like 20 years of experience and they've been in the pre-sales game for the longest time. And you watch the demo and you're like, you're still demoing the way you demoed in 2003.
Yeah.
And that can be really wild sometimes. But that presentation really lets people shine. And I go out of my way to ask gotcha questions that there's no way they know the answer to,
Yeah.
just to see how they deal with it.
Yeah.
I will ask them questions of things I know the platform doesn't do. I will ask them I just want to see how much deer in the headlights they are, how much they roll in the punches with the punches. I think that's a really important piece.
Yeah. And what that you talked about thinking fast on your feet, kind of
Yeah.
deer in the headlights. I know exactly what you're getting at, and I think it's
Yeah.
something that is quite innate within us,
Yes.
um, with variation. How do you? Is there so? Do you look at that in terms of asking these gotcha questions? Anything else that you do in that respect, or is it more just putting them a little bit on the spot?
Putting them a little bit in the spot and then gauging the types of questions that they ask throughout the interview process. I think that's a big one too.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And in terms of hiring, do you ever, when you're going through the interview process, and do you ever think to yourself, I think we're doing well. I think I've got a clear feel on the people we're speaking to based on this, but I'm not quite sure about this element. Are there any
Yeah.
kind of blind spots that you feel that the hiring process has?
Yeah, so I'd say a big blind spot the hiring process has is, and I'd say it's even more with salespeople than pre-sales people, is like in general, really good at selling ourselves. And people will come in and they'll do best foot forward and they will almost put up a facade of who they are
Yeah.
as an employee. And then you hire them, you're like, huh, that's not what I expected. And
Yeah.
that could be a big blind spot. And I think the best thing for that is just we got to make sure that the hiring isn't single threaded,
Yeah.
right? Like it could be like even if you're having a lot of conversations with somebody yourself, make sure other people are there for the presentations, other people are there for other parts of the people that you trust and hire and are on your leadership team. They've got great opinions on this and they will help you with blind spots.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that, I completely agree. And I think that, so there's a term, so conscientiousness, which kind of
Yeah,
wraps up like resilience, hard work, and accountability, all those sorts of
yeah,
things. I think that somebody can be an incredible performer, but if
yes,
that resilience and hard work and so on isn't there,
yeah,
then it kind of unravels quite quickly. And
big
I can
time.
think of sporting analogies where it's happened where you've bought a superstar player who's played so well for the first couple of games, and after that has just lost the spark. And I think that
It's like you're describing the entire Manchester United team.
oh yeah, basically. Don't get me started. So and then but I think that and it's not a perfect indicator, but I think tenures and progression at previous organizations
Yes,
is a good indicator of that. So
great indicator. Yeah.
yeah. So just to
If
highlight that.
somebody's been promoting somebody consistently, they must be doing something right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I mean, you mentioned earlier that you hired from different backgrounds, not
Yes.
necessarily from pre-sales.
Yeah.
Could you give us some examples? Because we do not all the time meet the hiring
You
managers
bet.
who,
Oh,
who
you bet.
are open to other backgrounds.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and we're fortunate to do this because again, we're not very hard tech. Like people don't need a computer science degree to be in pre-sales at our company, which is fantastic. I had a fantastic pre-sales person who was an accountant. He was an accountant who worked for a consultancy, and he had fantastic business acumen and curiosity, and he worked really, really hard. And he actually wanted to work harder than we wanted to work. I was like, dude, you're gonna burn out. So I was like, no, I want to give me more. And so he was great. Hired a in the UK. A bird just flew into my window. Hired a she at the time she was a recruiter, but really her passion was she's a country singer, an English country singer, which doesn't come along too often, but she was awesome. And she had a background in performing. I went to school for performing arts and acting and all that other stuff. And man, she was just an amazing presenter, tons of confidence. She's actually now moved into sales, where she's doing great there, but just a great personality for it. We had another person who was, at the time, she was working. She's what we call a social media coach, who helps small businesses do better at social media. But actually, her passion and what she did outside of work was she was an artist, a painter.
Right.
And because of it's weird. She was just really, really creative and was able to bring that into the pre-sales world, which was really cool. We've also hired proposal writers, because in essence, a proposal is like a demo on paper. So that's fascinating. We hired a psychology professor, and she was really fascinating, and she knew how to get in people's heads almost, which was, again, really useful. But yeah, we just news anchors.
Wow.
News anchors.
And I'm just curious because most of the candidates who are going to watch this interview, I believe it is their question also. So
Yeah.
how do they get through the pre-screening to get to you? Like most candidates do not get through that resources screening.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and we have that written into our job descriptions, where we don't just require pre-sales experience. There's other experiences that can apply as well. And so people can look in that and put that through. So for example, if we need people who've got a lot of experience in marketing or social media or something like that, then a lot of those other professions can apply to it.
Yeah.
So it's not just necessarily, you need technical experience, or you need IT experience or experience in the tech world. We open it up so that we do bring in more of those people, because we've got a strong academy where we can teach people these skills. And so we hire them for the soft skills, we teach them the hard ones, and then they're off to the races.
And I think you've touched on something that's so important here, in that it's such a competitive market. And if you look over the last year, for example, it's so hard, and it's so comforting to hire people from your competition that have pre-sales experience, or from different SaaS vendors that have pre-sales experience, and kind of impress you in the interview process. The problem is it gets so competitive that it's really hard to find those people. And so there's such a big pool of people out there who could be amazing, but it's a lot trickier to filter out to the point where you're really confident that they could do a great job, if that makes sense. And I think that as an industry, there's potential there to do some work to kind of unlock that. I don't know how, but
interestingly enough, on that topic, so I know the pre-sales collective, they've got their pre-sales academy, right, which takes people from other professions and teaches them the game. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot there is a lot of teachers are gravitating towards that and becoming pre-sales people. If we think about the skills that teachers need, they need to be able to command a room. They need to be able to explain things in a really simple way so that kids understand it. And those skills actually translate really well into the world of pre-sales.
Yeah, 100%.
Super. Thank you so much. I mean, from my side, I've exhausted all the questions. Thank you so much for
our pleasure.
Everything.
I mean, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much. We touched on lots of new topic areas there, and it's been really interesting. And so thank you so much for your perspective.
Our pleasure.
If you have some questions for us, of course, you can also ask us.
I'm curious. Why did you land on what you landed for in the model, like the wording and all that? I'd love to hear some of that.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So the model was developed together with Sova. Okay. So Sova, they developed bespoke assessments for they'll work with like Deloitte, for example, and they'll interview people at Deloitte and interview managers and work out what the secret sauce is for a great consultant. So they did the same for pre-sales with us. So they interviewed top performers from some customers of mine that were really generous in letting us speak with them. Don Carmichael, who did like a big dump around what pre-sales is. And so they put together their model, which is based upon a version of the Big Five personality model. And it was put into very occupational psychology terms. Okay. And so we then went through a process where I would turn it into pre-sales terms and they would say, no, that can't be right. And we kind of negotiated it between us all to get to the point where for, things like, I think, curiosity rather than thirst for learning, that sort of thing. And then the components of that, we just spent the time between them being real domain experts and then us having the experience talking to pre-sales hiring managers. It kind of came from that.
That's awesome. I love that. That's so cool. It's I think it's gonna be really wicked when this is more widely adopted and you start seeing those terms being used in job descriptions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I hope so. And I really hope this whole process, because it's a case of traction as well. It's like you're talking about the teachers, for example. That's something now that idea is getting some traction. And so I'm hopeful that at some point we can get that kind of traction. Let's see.
I love it.
And also,
very cool.
We are trying to validate it actually and trying to match the competencies with the best performers. So if you're also interested in this research, John can share with you the personality assessment.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to see that.
Amazing.
And you're also going to receive an individual report to see the percentage of those competencies for yourself. It is nice.
Very cool. Very cool.
Good stuff.
I love personality tests in general, right? Like Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, all that stuff. I find it really, really fascinating.
Yeah. And the idea for us is that, and this goes back to the intuition thing, is that people really want to be able to use their intuition, and it makes total sense. And the idea is for it to, if it throws up a few things, that makes sense, that's odd, that doesn't quite square with what I've seen so far. That means that in the next interview you can start to dig in there to see whether, do you know what I mean? It kind of brings up flags to be looked at rather than being some kind of end score and you should trust the data and nothing else.
Yeah, which is great, because if you think about it, in a perfect world going forward, and this becomes more widely adopted, you'll be able to just very easily start, in the same way with Myers-Briggs. It's like, you get along well with these personalities, you do not get along well with those. So you take this model and you see what kind of pre-sales person you are, and then it could be like, you would really not enjoy working at this company for this reason. This company is a great fit for this reason. These are your top three. This company matches those top three. You should go apply there. And so I think that's a great future state of where this could be when it's more widely adopted.
Yeah, 100%. And also because so if you get the competencies, the way that people are distributed is on a bell curve. It's the same as all personality traits. And so what you'll have is like the normal pre-sales population and then your team. So let's say, for example, your team super curious, they might be a bit further to the right, for example. If it's a team where, let's say, for example, they recognize that they're lacking a bit in that curiosity for whatever reason, then you can target that as something you want to have for the hire to kind of from a hiring manager's perspective to kind of offset that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. What you're saying is exactly why we're getting excited about this. So all good.
I love it.
Okay. Thank you again for your time and your transparency to share with us all these insights.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity and the great discussion. I learned a lot too.